For years, the anime world had an undisputed king, a show so beloved it was less a piece of media and more, well, a monument, something that just felt permanent and totally untouchable. On pretty much every major ranking site, you'd see the same thing. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood sitting at the top. It was a titan, and it was defended by this legion of fans who would swarm and fight off any challenger that even dared to get close to that #1 spot.
But then, in 2023, this new challenger didn't just knock on the door. No, it kicked it clean off its hinges. It smashed records, and somehow it overcame the infamous FMAB curse. That's the coordinated fan review bombing we just talked about.
It achieved this statistically massive score of 9.39 on my anime list. I mean, that's a number that a lot of people in the community thought was just impossible to ever reach. So how in the world did a quiet, kind of sad story about what happens after the journey is over pull off such a huge victory? Well, the answer isn't just in the numbers. It's really a story about storytelling itself. And to understand it, we've got to go back to the very roots of fantasy. So what was it that made its world so compelling? It just felt different, you know? It wasn't like the high-stakes, action-packed fantasy we've all gotten so used to. Exactly. I mean, so many modern epics, think Game of Thrones, they leaned really hard into that grim-dark realism, where everything's morally ambiguous and cynical. Frieren was a total return to the classical, almost poetic fantasy of someone like J.R.R. Tolkien. It really captured that feeling of his Fourth Age, that quiet, sad era after the big war is won. The elves are sailing away, and the age of humans is beginning. And it wasn't just the tone either. The magic system itself felt completely fresh and new. Oh, the spell's Zoltrak is the perfect example of the show's genius world-building. It shows magic not as some mystical, unchanging force, but as a technology. It's something that can be studied, it can be reverse-engineered, and it can be standardized. And that approach, man, it deeply appealed to gamers and all the world-building nerds out there. Okay, now let's talk about the villains. Because in a world where we're all used to complex, sympathetic antagonists with these tragic backstories, Frieren made a really bold choice. It just threw that whole idea right out the window. Right, and this is so important to get. The demons, or the Mazoku, they're presented as a completely different species. They are sociopathic predators who have just learned to mimic human emotion to lure in their victims. There's no reasoning with them, there's no talking them down, and that created this genuine sense of dread that you just don't feel in a lot of modern fantasy. And this whole approach to its villains led to one of the most shocking, most talked about scenes in all of modern anime. Frieren's simple, cold command to the demon Aura, it became an absolute internet sensation. Okay, so this is where things get really interesting, because culture played a huge role here. The English translation, Kill Yourself, was so direct and brutal that it accidentally connected with this notorious and frankly pretty toxic internet gaming meme. So while Japanese audiences might have seen the scene a little differently, Western viewers just saw this moment of absolute ice-cold dominance from Frieren, and the memes, they just exploded everywhere. But it wasn't just the shocking dialogue that got people talking. The show's visuals, the animation itself, became this huge topic of conversation, but maybe not for the reasons you'd expect. Yeah, I mean, fans and even professional animators were absolutely obsessing over these little moments, like a scene where the character Stark is just putting on a coat. The level of detail, the way you could almost feel the weight of the fabric, the way his muscles shifted underneath, it was celebrated all over the internet as an unnecessary flex. It was just a showcase of pure, incredible skill, just for the sake of it. And it literally changed how fans talked about high-quality animation. It expanded the definition of sakuga, a term that's usually saved for these huge, explosive action sequences, to include these quiet, subtle moments of just unbelievable character acting. And all of this beautiful animation was held up by this incredible musical score from Evan Call. He used all these Celtic instruments to create a feeling of ancient history and quiet sadness, which is, a perfect match for a story about an elf's long life and all her fading memories. So we have this profound story, we have incredible production values, but there's one more really important piece to this puzzle, and that's the fan community that just grew up around the show. The show's release date became known as Frieren Friday, and it was a genuine weekly online celebration. It wasn't just appointment viewing, it became this community ritual, and it was filled with fan art, memes, and these really deep discussions that would just keep the conversation going all week long. This whole shared experience created its own language, its own culture.
The show's main themes of time and memory, they became the fandom's inside jokes. When the show took a short break, you'd see fans everywhere saying, well, I guess we just have to wait 50 years, which perfectly captured the spirit of Frieren herself.
So what's the big takeaway from Frieren's amazing success? Well, I think it proves that audiences are really hungry for more than just big action. We want thoughtful, character-driven stories that respect our intelligence and really engage our emotions on a much deeper level. You know, the show's central idea is all about an elf looking back on a 10-year adventure that felt like a flash to her, but it ended up changing her forever. And it kind of leaves all of us with a question, doesn't it? What was that brief journey in your life that ended up having the longest, most profound impact? I think that right there is the real power of Frieren.